Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
Karen will have more on the Republican National Convention and Donald Trump's speech from last night in just a moment, but we begin with outages sweeping the world. Banks and airlines are reporting technical glitches after Microsoft reported an outage across its online services. Bloomberg's Ewan Potts joins us with the details from London. Good morning, Ewan.
Nathan and Karen, global disruption today as a software glitch takes down computer systems. Airlines in the Americas, Europe and Asia suspending flights on an unprecedented scale as a widespread computer outage causes chaos. The problems are reported to be related to CrowdStrike cyber security software operating on Windows computers. And it's not just the airlines, the disruption affecting companies as diverse as JP Morgan, McDonald's and the London Stock Exchange. Live in London, I'm Ewan Potts, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Ewan, thank you. And we'll continue to follow this story all morning long for you. But we do want to turn back to politics. Former President Donald Trump accepted the Republican Party's nomination for president last night for the third time. His keynote address was his first public speech since the assassination attempt last weekend. Trump says he rewrote the speech after the near-death experience, aiming to strike a uniting tone.
The discord and division in our society must be healed. We must heal it quickly. As Americans, we are bound together by a single fate and a shared destiny. We rise together or we fall apart.
After addressing the assassination attempt at the beginning of his speech, Trump launched into a broad pitch for his second term.
I will end the devastating inflation crisis immediately, bring down interest rates, and lower the cost of energy. We will drill, baby, drill.
And while former President Trump made multiple calls for unity, he also directed criticism at his political rival.
If you took the 10 worst presidents in the history of the United States, think of it, the 10 worst, added them up, they will not have done the damage that Biden has done. Only going to use the term once. Biden. I'm not going to use the name anymore, just one time.
And more than an hour and a half, Trump's speech was the longest ever for a nominee in the modern era.
And Karen, Trump's keynote address closes a Republican convention that demonstrated momentum and confidence that the former president will return to the White House in November. Bloomberg Politics contributor Jeannie Shanzano says while Trump's polling ahead of President Biden on several key issues, his rhetoric and selection of J.D. Vance as a running mate could create an opening for Democrats.
Democrats are happy with what they've heard because they thought this was going to be a unifying Trump, trying to present a new and improved Trump. And what they got after the beginning of that speech was more of the same. And I think that's what Democrats have been warning people about. This man at 78 years old has not changed at all.
And Bloomberg Politics contributor Rick Davis says Trump's speech ultimately sounded disjointed.
At the very beginning, when he talked about the assassination attempt last Saturday night, I think that that's when most people were probably tuning in. The rest of the speech became sort of this combination platter of his favorite tropes from the rallies and then a set speech. And he would just move in and out of them. And I would like to say flawlessly, but it was not flawless.
And Bloomberg Politics contributor Rick Davis says the second half of the speech did not effectively communicate Trump's message or strike a unifying tone.
Well, Nathan, as Republicans closed out their convention, President Biden remains committed to running, but now reports indicate he might be open to hearing concerns about his campaign. And Bloomberg's Amy Morris reports from Washington.
President Biden has reportedly asked for polling on how Vice President Kamala Harris would do against Trump. That, according to an ABC reporter in a post on X, citing an unidentified senior White House official. ABC reports the president now appears to be more receptive to hearing out calls for him to bow out of the race. This, as a new CBS News YouGov survey shows Republican Donald Trump has widened his lead against President Biden by 5 points nationwide, and he leads Vice President Harris by 3 points. Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Amy, thank you. And the Democratic pressure is mounting on the president. The Associated Press is reporting the Biden campaign's holding an all-staff meeting today. That follows a Washington Post report that former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi thinks Biden is close to being convinced to end his campaign. The paper adds former President Barack Obama told allies that Biden's pathway to victory is greatly diminished. On top of all of that, the New York Times says several people close to President Biden think he has begun to accept the notion he may not be able able to win in November. As all this is happening, the president is still recovering from COVID-19. The White House says his symptoms are mild.
But publicly, Nathan, not all Democrats are calling on the president to step aside. Here's New York Governor Kathy Hochul speaking with Bloomberg yesterday.
He has delivered for New York in extraordinary ways that I look forward to talking about even more. And I believe in his vision for our country. So I am with him as long as he wants to do this.
New York Governor Kathy Hochul added that she believes Biden has been an extraordinary president.
Let's turn to company news now, Karen. An earnings smash from Netflix. The streaming giant added 8 million new subscribers in the second quarter, nearly double the average estimate, and it also upgraded sales and profit forecasts for the year. Bloomberg intelligence analyst Geetha Ranganathan calls the Netflix report a complete blowout.
Remember, they had first predicted 24% operating margin for the whole of 2024. They took that up to 25% last quarter, now up to 26%. That's a 500 basis point increase from last year. Very likely that we can see up to 30% margins, maybe even as early as next year.
Geetha Ranganathan with Bloomberg Intelligence says Netflix's surge in growth comes as most streaming competitors slow down.
Elsewhere in company news, Nathan, Broadcom shares gained almost 3% yesterday after the information reported that the chip designer discussed making an artificial intelligence chip for OpenAI. And shares of Hawaiian Electric are higher this morning, up 40%. It comes as Bloomberg News reported Hawaiian Electric is among companies that tentatively agreed to pay more than $4 billion to resolve lawsuits over last year's Maui wildfires. Other defendants include a unit of cable provider Charter Communications.
And as for the broader market, Karen, we saw a pullback in mega-cap tech stocks broadening out to a wider sell-off yesterday. Concerns about a weakening economy and political uncertainty are moving into focus. Bloomberg macro strategist Mark Cudmore says market volatility did increase, but probably didn't mark a big turning point.
This is just a mini correction, and probably has a little bit more to play out, but I don't see it being drastic. I think the bigger story, the one that's maybe the chance to be sustainable, is the bigger kind of change of leadership that might be taking place. But there's a chance here that we could see the stock market have increased volatility, but overall we could see the big cap tech names suffer a lot more.
Bloomberg's Mark Cudmore says traders could revive positive sentiment next week when several big tech companies report earnings.
And it's time now for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. And for that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Russian court officials said closing arguments have begun in the trial of Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich. Prosecutors are seeking 18 years in jail. He faces charges of spying that he, the Journal, and the U.S. government have vehemently denied. Gershkovich has remained in custody since his arrest in March of 2023 while on a reporting trip to the Ural Mountains. A New York City council member who was arrested during a protest on Wednesday is talking about what happened. Councilwoman Susan Zhuang was charged after allegedly biting an NYPD chief during a protest against a proposed men's shelter in the Bensonhurst neighborhood. Yesterday at a community center in Gravesend, she told the crowd she does not think she should have been arrested in the first place.
Mistreatment by our NYPD, who I always support. It must be stopped. AAPI hate, agent hate, in any form must end.
A witness says Zhuang was trying to prevent an 81-year-old woman from getting hurt. However, City Council member Adrian Adams called it all disturbing.
Violence is completely unacceptable, and respect for our city workers doing their jobs it's just not negotiable.
Audio courtesy of ABC 7. New York Mayor Eric Adams called the injury to the officer a pretty nasty bite. A pretrial hearing scheduled in New York today for the retrial of disgraced movie mogul Harvey Weinstein. In April, Weinstein's rape conviction was thrown out by the New York's Court of Appeals after it was determined the trial judge unfairly allowed testimony against him based on allegations from other women that were not part of the case. Weinstein remained in custody at Rikers Island Jail Complex. A comedy legend has died. Bob Newhart, who had several stand-up albums and sitcoms, including The Bob Newhart Show, has passed away. Bob Newhart was 94 years old. And Lou Dobbs, the conservative political pundit and veteran cable TV host who was a founding anchor for CNN and later was a nightly presence on Fox Business Network for more than a decade, has died. No word on the cause of death given. Lou Dobbs was 78. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Karen.
All right, Michael Barr, thank you. And it's time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update with John Stashower. John, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Daniel Brown of England, Shane Lowry of Ireland had the two best rounds to begin the Open Championship in Royal Troon. Both have early tee times today in the second round. Brown, relative unknown, shot 65. Lowry, who won the Open 5 years ago, was 66. Neither had a single bogey. Justin Thomas overcame a double bogey on the 12th hole, shot 68. He had an 82 in round one last year. PGA winner Xander Schauffele is 2 under. Masters champ Scotty Scheffler -1. The recent U.S. Open winner Bryson DeChambeau 5 over par. Rory McIlroy 7 over, and Tiger Woods +8, 14 shots behind as he starts play today. Yankees and everyone else back playing tonight. Yanks at the stadium against Tampa Bay. Garrett Cole on the mound. Yanks come off their first winning series in a month. Aaron Judge hoping that several-week-long slump is over.
Each team goes through it where you have a couple down weeks, some high moments, but I think the most important thing is just staying consistent. We've lost a couple games with some crazy plays, and it comes down to us being consistent, man. That's the number one thing.
Judge with 34 home runs at the All-Star break. That's one more than he had at this time 2 years ago when he finished with 62. Mets and Red Sox both playing well lately. The season ended now. They make the playoffs. Mets have won 7 of the last 9. Played tonight in Miami. Sox have taken 9 of 12. They're in L.A. against Shohei Ohtani and the Dodgers. Speaking of whom, they just learned they'll start the 2025 season in Japan. So Ohtani will come home. They'll face the Cubs. Russell Westbrook apparently headed to yet another team. 11 years with Oklahoma City. Once the MVP, Westbrook has played for 4 teams the last 5 years. Now done with the Clippers. They traded him to Utah. The Jazz will reportedly buy out his contract, and Westbrook will sign with Denver. Jason Wright, who became president of the Washington football team in 2020, first black to hold such a position, now out with the Commanders. He had been hired by the former owner, Dan Snyder. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. Karen and Nathan.
Coast to coast on Bloomberg Radio, nationwide on Sirius XM, and around the world on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager as we continue to monitor the rapidly cascading series of software glitches sweeping the globe, hitting everything from airlines to banks and markets. For the latest, we're joined by Bloomberg's Kriti Gupta in London. Kriti, good morning. I know this has been going on for hours, but for those who are first waking up to this news, when did this start? What has been happening?
Good morning, Nathan. This happened really overnight in Asia. This all started with reports, especially on Down Detector, coming out of Japan and Australia, talking about issues with, 1, the CrowdStrike platform, and 2, the Microsoft offerings in that region. Now, we still don't know at the moment whether or not these are two issues that are related or simply happening at the same time, but it has since spread globally. Predominantly, we're starting to see it show up in the airlines with a lot of these kind of airlines in the States for initially issuing ground halts, the likes of Delta, American Airlines, as well as United. It looks like American Airlines has now released that ground stop. You have airports around the world that are talking about several IT outages as well. But it doesn't just go into the airline space. You're now seeing it show up in the likes of banks, for example. Even the folks over at JP Morgan saying there are employees that are unable to log on. Several broadcasters right here in the UK as well, unable to broadcast their network operations.
So while we wait to get an idea of what's behind this, how this started, I mean, it speaks, if nothing else, to the vulnerabilities that we could continue to face just from having so much operations of, businesses, not just in the tech sector, but broadly relying on the cloud.
It does. And it almost has a little bit of deja vu, I imagine, for a lot of the airline watchers as well, of what we saw a couple of years ago back with the Southwest kind of infrastructure infrastructure and technical issues there as well. Right now, I should very quickly mention that some of the airports in the states that initially said they were having issues have since pulled back on it. Heathrow right here in London as well, saying they're having issues, but they're dealing with it in their contingency plan and flights are operational. But to your point, Nathan, about this broader infrastructure spend and transition to the cloud, it brings a lot of concern. We talk about it really accelerating into the world of AI and this kind of AI age, but we have to remember that not everyone is even on the cloud yet. Where not everyone has even the cybersecurity infrastructure for those who are looking at the fallout of the issues with the CrowdStrike update as well. So there are concerns here, but it might more accelerate that spend rather than have people scare away from it.
And just to pass along a headline breaking right now, Microsoft is saying it is aware of the issue affecting Windows devices and says that it's due to an update from a third-party software platform, anticipating that a resolution is forthcoming. That might get us a little bit closer, Critty, to getting something of an idea of what could be behind this. But it's having a market impact as well. I mean, we did see the tech sell-off this week. Is it adding to that?
Is definitely magnifying it. And I should mention, when we started covering this story, we had still seen European futures. The markets hadn't opened yet. We had seen them pointing decidedly lower. But on these headlines, as they rolled out, we first saw a delay in the openings of the stock markets here in Europe as well. Traditionally, it takes no more than 60 seconds for the FTSE to get prices on the FTSE 100. It took a couple of minutes to do that. But, you know, in this industry, time is of the essence. But it also started to see some issues when it came about in terms of bids for haven assets, for example. So you immediately saw risk sentiment turn around. Some of the airline stocks, of course, taking the biggest hit. The banks, HSBC, Barclays, even the London Stock Exchange that is publicly listed, all took some pretty big hits in trading, or at least in the early opening trades as well. And then, of course, you did have the bids into your classic safe haven, the Japanese yen, the Swiss franc, treasuries even catching a bid as well. And, of course, U.S. futures turning lower. It looks like some of those gains or some of those moves have been paired, but that was the knee-jerk reaction.
All right. Well, of course, we're going to be monitoring this throughout the morning. Thank you for this. Bloomberg's Critty Gupta with us from London. I want to turn now to the final night of the Republican National Convention. Donald Trump's return to the stage, a return to near total control of the GOP after the attempt on his life last weekend. Joining us for more on that is Bloomberg News senior editor Bill Ferries. Bill, good morning. We had heard from the former president that he had changed his speech to make it more of a message of unity. Is that what we heard last night in this 93-minute address to the crowd in Milwaukee?
Hour and a half. So there were moments where the former president, talked about unity and he said, at one point, the discord and division in our society must be healed. And he started off his speech giving a very kind of detailed moment-by-moment description of the shooting over the weekend and what he was thinking, what he went through. But it definitely veered off script for at many moments, and there were a lot of harsh attacks on Democrats, the media, migrants to the U.S. There was a lot of, it was kind of this mix of on script and off script that anyone who has watched some of Donald Trump's rallies has become accustomed to seeing. So not a lot of a focus on that unity. And there wasn't a hugely changed tone that, we'd been led to believe was coming in the days after the shooting.
And I would imagine not a hugely changed policy idea coming from the former president as well, talking about, building the wall, getting away from clean energy, cracking down on immigration. What did we hear in terms of policy in a potential second Trump administration?
Well, there was this, I think, pitch to almost like a nostalgic pitch to where America was, where the economy in particular was before the pandemic hit during Trump's presidency. He talked about inflation had been low, economic growth had been strong, unemployment had been low. Economists would tell you that's kind of the situation America is in now as well. But yeah, you're right. He talked about the wall, rebuilding the wall. There were not specifics about a lot of specifics about what a second Trump term would bring beyond. He said he would continue building the wall. He would cut taxes. He would get rid of credits for electric vehicles. But if you were looking for, hey, what would the first 100 days of a new Trump presidency look like, you weren't going to get a lot of those kind of details.
So does that provide an opening of some sort for Democrats who are, really seeing the current president's campaign flounder? It's like it's hanging on by a thread for President Biden.
That was actually some of the feedback you heard from Democrats in the hours after that speech ended. They said, there were a lot of people online saying, this is a candidate we can beat. But of course, what was almost overshadowing the entire RNC on this last day was the status of the Biden campaign and whether he will be the candidate that Donald Trump is facing in November. There's a lot of doubt about that. And I think that may have even played into Trump's decision, with one exception, not to mention Joe Biden by name.
So in our last minute, Bill, what have we confirmed about the pressure that is on the president to potentially step aside?
Well, what we know, every few hours it seems like you have another senior Democrat. We had two more senators coming in, John Hickenlooper and John Tester coming in. We have a report from the Associated Press that the Biden campaign is scheduling an all-hands staff meeting for Friday. So that has only fueled more speculation that there may be a change coming. Listen, the president is at home isolating with his COVID-19 situation. That has kind of prevented him from doing the counter programming that normally he would be out there trying to do. And it's just more and more senior Democrats coming forward, including now Barack Obama apparently getting involved in some of the discussions and raising concerns about whether Joe Biden will be the strongest candidate the Democrats can put forward in November.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Today, your morning brief on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed at 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, and Bloomberg 960 in San Francisco.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, SiriusXM, the iHeartRadio app, and on Bloomberg.com. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.